Richard Feynman. You know, I started learning about the Feynman diagrams. I didn't really know much about him, uh, and then I read a couple of his papers, and I went, this guy is different. He's different. He thinks differently. His concept of how he views the world is different. And it's, so many, he did this weird one about people brushing their teeth. He says, millions of people get up in the morning, they brush their teeth. He says, you picture the terminus of the between light and dark circling the earth, and that everyone along that terminus are all furiously brushing their teeth. He says, it's not about whether it's good or bad for you to brush your teeth in the morning. He said, the point is to see the world differently. That's all I try to do with my near-death experience. I just want people to know that it's okay to think differently. A lot of medical professionals, when you talk about the near-death experience, they all, especially people who've worked in the more, where you're getting code blues and shit all the time. The fear of death. I try to explain to people about the fear of death. Okay, so I fear dying. I know where I'm going. I've known my whole life, which is why I lived the stupid ass life of a dumbass lucky adventurer who didn't kill himself, okay? Cannot tell you how many times I took my life into this stupid hand, okay? But it's an instinct. It's not what I know and what I believe in my core, okay? I cannot overcome the fear of death. It's instinctual. We have survival instinct. I talk about losing the fingernails on my hands. I lost 7 fingernails trying to claw myself. The second time that I drowned, okay, I tried clawing myself up out of the water. I think I was like 19, me and my brother Gerald, up at the coast, and we got hit by this freak wave. He didn't have any gear on, and he was had everything in the boat, and I had a snorkel, a mask, and I had a weight belt on. And with this real sharp little cove, as we start going out, I'm looking at deep water, and all of a sudden the bottom comes up like, and I'm sitting there with my knees and my hands on the bottom. And I look up, and it wasn't a big giant crashing wave kind of thing. I looked up, and here comes this bump. It's tall, and as it's approaching to me, it's getting taller and taller and taller and taller. And I remember popping my weight belt, which was probably a mistake. I popped my weight belt, and I tried to dive into the wave, and I figured it would just carry me to shore. And what it did was it just lifted. I just went, and my brother said I went by about 12 feet in the air with my feet kicking. And when I looked over my shoulder, I saw all the rocks. And it was going to crash me right into the rocks. And these rocks were dry, okay? They were dry, big boulders, except for one little pool of water. This is fate. One pool of water, a big hole is what it was, just about the size of me to land in. I landed in that hole, and I was locked up against the rocks. I hit so hard that I bit the upper part of my right. I smashed all of the teeth in my face. I bit through the top part of the regulator, and my hood went, the water was going by so fast, it went, and it sucked my hood off. Anybody's ever been scuba diving and wearing a hood, they can imagine the kind of pressure it took to, it just inflated that thing and just flew it off my head. And next thing you know, I'm on the bottom and I'm reading a newspaper. Plain as day, okay? Reading a newspaper, and I flip the page over, and here's the obituaries, and my eye is drawn right to this one obituary about a drowning just south of Vendome Beach. And it was explaining, his family and where he lived, and I all of a sudden I realized, I said, that's me. I'm reading my obituary. And I believe that's one of the things that I saw when I died. And that's why it happened, and that I didn't drown. Because I looked up and I could see it was closing. I was browning out. It was going, and I stuck my hands right up through that little hole of light that was left. And when I came out of the water, I had a tube of water. When I coughed, it was like, ooh, a solid, like foot long, that big around thing of water. And I'm grabbing the rock, and it's got this purple seaweed that grows on the north coast. And it is so slick, okay? You can't walk on it. And I'm trying to dig my fingernails into it. Now, thinking differently, that was the reason the newspaper was there, because that saved my life. I was unconscious, but I was thinking, even though I'm unconscious, my conscious self, my quantum self, okay, there was a piece of information that set off my survival instinct. And that I saw that during my near-death experience. And there has been many slices that I saw as they showed me my life, and they've all come true. And that one saved my life. And then I had another one save my life, and maybe I'll tell the story about that one day, okay? About being mixed up with the wrong people. Lessons to be learned there, okay? Yeah, I've had circumstances where just knowing, absolutely knowing, not having a vision, but understanding in a deja vu sense, this is that moment. This is, see? And it has happened all throughout my life until the last one. The very last one. And it all stopped. No more. And, damn near what? 20 fucking years. No, 18 years. It stopped. Everything was no more visions, no more about anything. And that was when I was crossing the exact same bridge that was the split in my life. And as I'm crossing a bridge that I did not know existed in a car that only 5,000 of them were ever made, and here I am in that lane, in that car that was that special color, okay, that no one but me had in the whole, I don't think there's a car in the world that had the same paint job that my Z had. It's just too many coincidences. And when it happened, it was shocking. I almost had a fucking heart attack. I pulled over to Vera's Villa Valona, and I smoked cigarette after cigarette, just thinking, wow, it did, what I thought was going to happen when this moment came didn't happen. What is going on? What just happened? Because I knew that was it. I knew from there on out there were going to be no more visions. And that's what I credit my wife with. The woman that I met who saved my life. Simply by loving me. Shows you how powerful love is. Okay? And you don't have to be super special or do anything crazy. Totally affected my life. And then now I've affected other lives. You have to be able to see the world in differently and don't see this construct, okay, as a representation of actual reality. Yes, it is our reality. The holographic principle of reality tells us this is just information being broadcast into a two-dimensional space. What the fuck? Well, it's hard for the human mind to think that differently, right? Yet it's true. So what's the problem with thinking that the fear of death is only based on instinct? Instinct. See? Everyone wants to die quietly and peaceful in their sleep. People don't want to die in fires or get run through farming equipment or, you know what I mean? We have this primal instinct of survival that we cannot overcome. So this is part of the driving force of religion. I ask religious people, okay, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to give me the first thing that comes into your mind. And I said, okay, so now you've just died. What do you see? And there's a big delay every time. Big delay. It's a test, you see. If I said, where are you? I'm with God. Well, where are you? I mean, what does it look like around you? What's going on? What big, long pauses? Because they never thought about that. Because now you have to have a reason. You say, oh, so we just end up at this place and now what? We just live forever as fucked up people who have to be forgiven every day because we're so fallible. You see this whole fallacy dream of heaven falls apart. Okay, when you have a near-death experience, it's not dead. I tell everybody, when you're dead, you go to that place where God is. When there's no going back, when you finished your task, that's where you go. Okay. Where I went is a place where time and space doesn't exist. And that's where people who commit suicide or have died when they weren't supposed to, or died when they shouldn't have because of this train of incidents and accidents that happen from the simplest little things that people say or do. And they weren't supposed to die. And they say, you have to go back. And they're like, but I don't want to go back. Well, you have to go back. Very few people go, oh yeah, I can't wait to get back, okay? You have to be able to think about this place being real as the holographic principle of reality, or the fact that fucking waveforms aren't particles until they're observed. Come on. What I'm proposing is that the event that thousands and thousands and thousands of people have every year is real. And that the fear of death is what keeps it from being explored, although it has been explored. They had one guy, as people would die, he would measure their weight. And he did it with dogs and he did it with people. And that there's a change in mass for some reason. God, quantum gravity, if we start heading there when it comes to microtubules, that would get a little too complicated. The microtubule system is where we exist in our bodies. That is absolutely controlled by the electrochemical machine that we're stuck in. You cannot fight. You have to sleep. You get hungry. The things that make this biological body function, you are a prisoner of that. And everything that means, okay? If you're starving to death, you'll do pretty much anything to get food. Good or bad. See, it's about choices. You have to be able to just think for a moment. Okay, so if all these weird things that are stranger than belief can be true, why not this other dimension? We already know there's more than four. That's the big fight. Is there 10 or 11, right? I mean, yeah. Richard Feynman, you see, he was the person who inspired me to go ahead and think and to accept. After that event, that shattering event where this is where I commit suicide. This is where I see the mushroom cloud. This is where I all those things. These are all the people that are depending on me to help them, and I'm like, fuck you. I'm gonna jump. I knew that what I was doing was leaping to my death, but in desperation, I thought miracles could happen. And when I hit the water and I'm underwater and the entire everything is lit up, very bright, and I can see the dark pillars of the bridge as it's collapsing into the water. That was what was supposed to happen at that moment, and it didn't. And I'm, wow, okay, now what? Now what? See? What the hell now? I didn't ever plan for this. That was when I understood a lot of things that I was shown about the decision to or not to. And that you can make that circle a billion times and it doesn't matter because that reality goes on without you. But there is a place, a different reality, a different future, a different time that splits off when you make the right decision. And I think about it, I'm like, okay, so right now, with this new bridge and that bridge there should be a bright flash and a towering mushroom cloud going up. That's why it freaked me out so bad. I haven't talked about this much, have I, during my near-death experience? But if I'm going to ask you to think differently, then it's only fair that I do talk about what happened during that why. Okay? That's why there was no mushroom cloud. That's why there was no, terrible ending with people screaming in fear. It was different. Where I didn't do it, where I didn't jump. Instead of me being selfish and basically committing suicide to try to live at all costs, even though I knew what I was doing was wrong, all those people there that were looking at me because I got up on the car and I waved them over and they understood immediately that they were supposed to come and listen to me. Not many, 24, 25 people. That's all. They knew it. I knew it. I knew it was the right thing for me to do because they feared the death that was about to become them. They feared it to a point where they were terrified. And all they needed was the only thing that would convince them would be me and my near-death experience, that it's okay to be afraid of death. It's okay to fear the way you're going to die. It's okay to have that doubt in your mind constantly about what happens after I die. Is it just black? Does everything come to an end? Do I cease to exist? You see, that's fucking terrifying to people. And that's why religions sprung up, I believe. Because people started having near-death experiences and they went, yeah, but there's something else. It's not just you're dead and everything. There's something else. And I believe that that's from the near-death experience. The minute a creature becomes sentient and conscious, that when they can have these, if they get severely injured or whatever, they can have these near-death experiences. And it affects them deeply. I can tell you it affected me deeply my whole fucking life. It's why I'm sitting here talking to you about it right now. And a lot of other people, okay, have had it and changed their lives. So just try to think differently. It's another dimension is what it is. It's just another dimension. And it's so close to us. You know what I mean? It's so close to us. It's not someplace like that. It's here. It's so close to it that you start to leak out of your microtubule just the tiniest little bit, and you're already in that other dimension. Hammeroff and Penrose about microtubules. That was what sealed the deal for me. And my wife, Katie, she's the one that saved me. I think she was the one that put me on a different path, that had a different future, that was a different place in a world where I didn't commit suicide. And that's why now it's blank. No more, I don't get no more revelations. Every now and again I get a tiny little bit of deja vu thing like everyone does, but not the kind of hardcore, long experiences I had had throughout my life. It's over, done. Blank fucking slate now. Borrowed time. So it's okay to fear death. Okay? Don't let your doubt make up your mind, because the doubt that I feel is instinct, and it took me for many years, okay, to try to train myself to not let it affect me. Okay? Because death being a constant companion with me, it was always there, gnawing the doubt, the maybe, see? And this is exactly why during my near-death experience, I had these slices cut out that were shown to me. To just beat it into me until I finally just succumbed and went, okay, you're right. Okay, I give up, fine, fuck, it's real. I'm not going to spend the other half of my life trying to disprove what happened to me. Because I tried desperately to understand what had happened to me. Right about the age of 30, you know what I mean? I was peaking about what the fuck was that about? How do I go about discovering the truth about what happened? And I started studying the near-death experience and was astounded. I was blown away about how many people had had the same thing happen to them in so many of the same ways. I was like, oh shit, okay, so now what? How do I explain it? And I thought I could find it in religion. Nope. No. But when I read Richard Feynman's book and I saw how he thought differently, and that made it okay for me to think differently, and I started accepting other ideas as truth that were hard to accept as truth, that had to do with quantum mechanics. And then I've spent the last 20 years matching those two things up. And every discovery that I have about quantum mechanics, and it is made by other greater minds, it just confirms it more and more. And it makes more sense to me. See, does not get rid of the instinct of survival, the fear of death. That it's always going to be there, okay? I have talked to people who they believe but they've never had a near-death experience, but they know they're close to somebody who did. And the conviction of those people and watching them change. Those people saw those people change before their very eyes, from this person and this personality, and this is how the dickhead was, to a totally different person, understanding, kind, generous, loving, all of it. I wish there was a way to, I haven't, movies don't cover it. There's been a few fake books, although there are some good books there also about their near-death experiences. But like Feynman said, okay, and he was a great mind, right? You cannot be afraid of thinking differently. That's the whole point. That's the road to discovery, okay, is being able to think differently.